Hello and welcome to Kinship Earth Connections. I'm your host, Lauren Archer, Executive Director of Kinship Earth. On behalf of our founders, Susan Davis Mora, Walter Mora, and Stephen Gomes, our advisory team, our donors, members, and extended community of kindred spirits, we'd like to thank you for joining us today. Before I introduce today's featured presenter, Alisa Gravitz, I'd like to share a little bit about the KINS network phenomenon for those of you who are new to our community. For over 40 years, Susan Mora has established over 40 KINS innovation networks of heart-centered earth advocates who are working all over the world to raise consciousness, to transform our global economy and systems from fear and greed to generosity and love. KINS members recognize that we are part of one whole, interconnected living system, and our greatest passion is spontaneously collaborating on projects and initiatives that are collectively ushering in the regenerative renaissance. We are playing what Buckminster Fuller called the world game, with a goal of making humans net positive to nature. And we play using the strategy of generosity, and we only win when we all win. At each Kinship Earth Connections event, we introduce members of our KINS community to share progress on their initiatives, help facilitate introductions and strategic alliances, and foster our growing community as one global network. Today, we are delighted to welcome Alisa Gravitz, President and CEO of Green America, a not-for-profit green economy organization founded in 1983 to advance marketplace solutions to society's most pressing social and environmental problems. Green America harnesses economic power, the strength of consumers, investors, businesses, and the marketplace to create a socially just and environmentally sustainable society. They work for a world where all people have enough, where all communities are healthy and safe, and where the abundance of the earth is preserved for all the generations to come. And they focus on 4 areas for system transformation: climate and clean energy, sustainable food and agriculture, responsible investing, and fair labor. And in addition to her influential work with Green America, Alisa assumed a leadership role serving several KINS networks after Susan Davis Mora moved to Ecuador. Through the Center for Sustainability Solutions, Alisa's organization sponsors 6 KINS-inspired networks, including Clean Electronics Production Network, Soil and Climate Alliance, Regional Regenerative Agriculture, Climate Safe Lending, the Soil Carbon Initiative, and the Solar Circle. Alisa, thank you so much for being with us today to give us a high-level overview of your amazing results-driven initiatives. So everyone, let's give a warm Kinship Earth welcome to Alisa Gravitz.
Oh, thank you all so much. I'm feeling really, really close to KINS and Susan this week, because we just spent a week together with our Solar Circle network. And 22 years ago, in fact, Susan gave me a call and said, "Oh, I'm thinking of starting a Solar KINS. I need you to be side by side with me on that." And so we did. And 22 years later, we just had maybe one of our best meetings ever. So I know Susan's feeling a little under the weather because of intense meetings this morning that she's already had. But Susan, I know you'll listen to the recording, and I'm just so grateful. And all the Solar Circle members send their love because they knew I was going to be talking with you guys all today. And some of our Solar Circle colleagues were on this. So greetings to you. Them. So I am going to share the screen here. I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about the Center for Sustainability Solutions. And even this introductory slide here, the title slide, which usually zip right through, I just wanted to note that we are completely KINS based, and we're on the spectrum of KINS. KINS do amazing things in many dimensions all around the world. And at one point, Susan and Marilyn Levin and I put all the KINS on a map, and we realized that there was like this beautiful spectrum. Sort of on one end of the spectrum is what Susan likes to call the destiny path KINS, where people get together to really deepen their understanding of their mission in the world. And one of my dreams is that everyone in the world would be part of a destiny path KINS, because that would just create amazing kinship and connection around the world. And the idea, like you were saying in your introduction, Lauren, of how when we all work together, it's a win for everybody. All the way to perhaps the other end of the spectrum in the work that we've adapted at the Center for Sustainability Solutions, where we're using KINS to look at how do we transition large supply chains. Sometimes Susan calls them industrial KINS. And I guess that's the case, because we're working with many, many people from very large, the business world. And let me tell you, KINS is as powerful in the destiny path as it is in the larger supply chain type of work. And there's as much generosity, love, and magic there as everywhere in the KINS world. And so what I want to do today is just make sure that there we go. Did that work? There we go. That what I want to do a really quick background on sort of where our work all began with Susan, the principles and frameworks that we use, and if we have time, a case study on our soil. In the regenerative agriculture work is just so meeting the moment. I am going to talk quickly so I can use best the time. Sit back, enjoy. Don't worry about taking notes or anything, because we'll share the presentation after today's meeting. So, of course, where it all begins is Susan Mora. So, gosh, many, many moons ago, 25, 30 some odd years ago, Susan and I knew each other pretty well through the social investing realm. She called me up one day and she said, Alisa, I had a dream last night. We were in the same spirit school. Did you have that same dream? And I said, Susan, alas, I did not, but I'm with you no matter what. And she said, okay, that's good, because I need a sister by my side for the KINS work that I'm going to be expanding. And so that's where it all began. And I already knew the power of KINS from being part of Susan's networks, and working with her side by side just really just made that blossom in my heart and mind. And you know, Susan loves to say, when you use KINS principles, everything goes faster, cheaper, with more magic and love, and 100%. Lauren just did a great job of introducing what Green America does, and happy to tell you more, but I'm going to zip through here. And we are very much marketplace solutions, economic action focused. So we look at all the different roles that we all play in the economic realm, as consumers and investors, business leaders, and all of that work is done with KINS principles. Indeed, our very theory of change is in our economic roles as consumers and investors. We demand economic change for justice and regeneration. Small green businesses develop the solutions, and then using KINS, people come across the system, come together to scale the transformative sustainability solutions. The KINS principles are at the foundation of our work. For the rest of this conversation, I'm going to focus on our work at the center. And I know that you probably all know these principles, but here are the KINS principles that I think all of you may know well, although it's really great to have some new folks with us today. So I wish I could channel Susan right here and have her voice saying these. I was going to have her tell us the principles, but our strategy is generosity and our intention is wonder. A deal is a good deal when it is good for all concerned, including Mother Earth herself. Everyone does what we love to do and little else. And we sit at the table of the unknown and invite the universe to co-create with us for the highest good for all concerned. I just think these are really, they create such magic and love. When we're dealing with industrial KINS, sometimes with people from big companies, my team used to kick me under the table and say, you can't say generosity, magic, and love in this kind of a setting. But I insisted on it, and guess what? It works. It totally works. So they have seen the magic and love, and they have long since let me say that. So the principles and frameworks of KINS are at the center of what the center does. So I'm going to run by that a little bit and give you a little methodology as well, and some history. So the way we use KINS, and we call them the innovation network, is that we identify an opportunity, a market opportunity. Many times it comes out of one of our other KINS networks, so they're all highly related. I know Forrest is with us today, and I met Forrest in one setting, and now we're working in yet another KINS network setting, so it's amazing. As we create a fractal of the group, because obviously KINS, what we want to do is we want to bring the whole system into the room. Susan calls it identifying the constituencies. And so we can convene a design team that represent the constituencies, create an initial audacious working goal. We form hypotheses about the key constraints and opportunities. We conduct interviews to find if there are other people interested in this, where we're testing the hypotheses and making them better, and we're finding the people who meet the KINS criteria. We map the headwinds, the tipping points, and the shifts. We identify the participants and invite them to the network, and then we build a dynamic, trust-based group that moves quickly, validates hypotheses in real time, generates ideas for initiatives and tests them. We learn, we iterate, we adapt, and then the ones that really work and really catch hold, we scale market interventions that work. And by we scale, sometimes the network itself does it. Sometimes we hand it off to somebody in the network to do it. Sometimes we find other people to do it. But the idea is there are many ways to take action and scale the KINS. The real keys to success here, and we can talk about them more in depth later, but is that Susan's brilliance of getting the whole system into the room, all of the key constituencies. To have world-class facilitation to help the group come together and move along, because there's a really amazing pattern about where groups flourish and where sometimes they get stuck, and the facilitators can help if they have deep training in KINS. That we create teams to support the initiatives, actually staff teams to support the initiatives. We identify specific frameworks. In addition to the KINS networks, the KINS frameworks and principles, there are specific frameworks for the work. And we develop real clarity about the mission and goals and metrics and frame and focus of the network, and create a dynamic culture for learning and action. So let's see, next, does the slide show up? Next slide, about the 4 tools.
Yep.
So 4 tools that we use in the networks is, again, we call it force field analysis, but identifying the crosswinds, the headwinds, and the tailwinds, because, and it's just so powerful to have a whole group of constituents making that map, so together we can really see the system emerge. We then identify the key shifts, that if we want transformation for equity and regeneration, how do we move from the current reality to the future reality, and identify those shifts. And that's where those shifts is where the initiatives are created to identify those shifts. We really drill down on what the focus and the frame is, so that we're really clear about the focus. We know what's in frame. So as the network succeeds and creates all this change in the world, they can move into the larger aspects of the frame. So for example, in our solar circle, our original focus was photovoltaics. Now we've long since moved into the whole big picture of energy efficiency and electric vehicles and grid integration and all kinds of amazing things. But by really being clear about what your focus is now, what your frame is, where you may be going in the future, and what's out of frame. You know, I was with a group recently that had a really good focus and a really good frame, but they were talking themselves into a situation where they had to solve all of capitalism and all of racism before they could move forward, and that wasn't going to really help the world. So so you want to design so what you're doing addresses racism and capitalism, but you also, unless it's a group focused on solving racism and capitalism, you want to make sure that you are not tripping up by, you know, systems people often want to bring the whole universe into the room. So how do you make sure that you find that focus frame and what's out of frame? And then to look at your system and identify where your pressure points are. You know, when you do that system map, you know, you can literally see where are the acupressure points, where are the leverage points, where are the choice points, who's making choices in the system, who can leverage the system, and who has their finger on those acupressure points so that they can change. So we always use the KINS membership principles. We're looking for people who are held in high regard by their peers. We want them to both be able to represent their systems and influence their systems, whether it's a company, whether it's a nonprofit, whether it's a government agency, you know, whether it's a house of worship, that they can and engage the people in their network, that they have their expertise in their part of the system. No one will have expertise in the whole system. That's what's the beauty of KINS. When you get everyone into the room and we learn from each other, everybody has simultaneously expert mind. We all like to be experts on the things we do well, and beginner's mind. We're learning from each other. And that is one of the reasons why you get so much creativity, bringing expert mind and beginner mind in the same person together. So we don't revert to roles of being the experts or the learners, but we bring those together. They're deeply committed to the network goal and KINS principles, and that transcends. So we want them to be able to represent and influence whatever the constituency is that they represent. But we also want the passion for the goal to transcend those representational roles so that we can all work together and make the change. Very important, proven collaboration skills. By the way, in company settings, that means we usually don't want the CEOs. They are exceptions. We also don't want the folks who are just entering the workplace, because then they don't have the influence and they don't know how to move the system. But it's often the people in the middle that can influence in both directions that have the highest collaboration potential. And we want people to be able to use their left and right brains, their intuition and their analysis, so while being oriented towards action. So those interviews that you do for your KINS networks, extremely important. No one is better at this than Susan. I learned so much at her knee from that. So stop me if you're not seeing the next slide. One of the other things that we really presence for the whole group and help, and our facilitators have to be really good at this, is that if you're really pushing the edge, there are many, many, many tensions that will appear. Some people want to move fast. Some people want to move slow. Some people are introverts. Some people are extroverts. Some people want to transform the system that exists. Some people want to design the system of the future. All of those and many more will be present. And what's important to presence for the group is these will all be present. All of us, let's work together to honor them and to design better, because we have all of these things present. If we acknowledge them and work with them, we get better results. So I have literally had people come up to me after the first KINS meeting and hug me and say that this slide right here is worth being part of KINS, because it's sort of like, I wish I would have had it for the decades of bad meetings I've had. And so getting people to work together with you on these are really important. I want to give you just 3 center success stories, which are KINS successes. The solar industry one, you had an opportunity to hear from some of our Solar Circle members. But in 2002, when this all started, small, highly fragmented, very expensive industry, even the people in climate, like Pew Charitable Trust and the World Resources Institute, were basically going, forget about solar, it's too expensive, it's just a hobby, it's never going to happen for the world, which is why the KINS group got together to make it happen for the world. Let me tell you, just the amazing thing, just to one small metric, it was $17 a watt to install in 2002. Coal and natural gas were $3. That was why it was being dismissed as not credible. By 2020, we hit the targets for the lowest cost new energy source in the world. It's now 25 cents a watt to install, which means people, particularly in the developing world, this is their best new source of energy. Solar and wind together are both in this situation and are the #1 new installations globally. The Economic Energy Agency, the International Energy Agency, part of the United Nations, up until last summer was telling countries, because that was their job, to advise countries on what to do with their energy policy, that they must use everything, all the fossils and whatever, to develop it. They did a 180 last year because the costs had come down. I mean, they had been a thorn in our side because they kept undermining renewables, because they kept advising fossils. And now, so I mean, the power of KINS. Now, don't get me wrong, we didn't install every solar panel, but the influence that the KINS group had was enormous. In this meeting we just had, one of the top energy officials in California was there. So we were in real time watching them manage to avoid everybody having to have rolling blackouts. Their genius that they implemented, which was the sending out the alert to ask people right now, please conserve, got all the press. It did beautifully. It was amazing. It just shows the power of the collective. The other exciting part of the story that's a little bit wonky that people didn't know is what the solar community has done over the last decade is install a lot of storage, specifically batteries that are really good for 4 hours to bridge that time when the sun goes down and when people start going to bed, and energy use goes down. And they called on all of that storage that comes out of the renewable energy system. Those two alone are what prevented the drought. So a Solar Circle, a KINS success. Sometimes what we do is we retire KINS networks when they meet their objectives. So example, in community investing, we were trying to get more capital into that sector. Our original goal was 1 billion, and through the brilliance of the KINS network, we hit 3.2 billion, and set up ways for that capital to keep rolling in, so that there are many investment companies and mutual funds that now just routinely dedicate a percentage into community investing, and so that money rolls in. And on recycled paper, 2005, in just a few years, we got 150 major magazines that represented something like 60 or 70% of the U.S. paper use for magazines onto recycled paper. So just amazing things that KINS networks do. I'm going to move through this really quickly, but along the way, again, the network doesn't always do the heavy lifting. Sometimes we get other people to do the heavy lifting. And here's some of the examples here. We do spend a lot of time to get the research and metrics so that we know what dials we have to move. We got the National Renewable Energy Lab to do that for us back in 2002. It was really amazing. They did the work for us. It took them 2 years, but it really helped us fine tune all those acupressure points. We work on media and messaging. One of the really fun things, we had to get the solar industry groups to collaborate because there were 4 of them. They were always undermining each other. We got them in a room one time all together. Again, that's the network influencers invited them to join us for a meeting. And by the end of the meeting, we got, of the 4, we got two mergers. So now there was only 2 groups, and we got them to agree on how they would communicate with each other and cooperate with each other. Within 18 months, we got the National Solar Energy tax credits. And we got the major, California's been major, their policies, that first policy initiative that they got on solar. And that's because everybody was now cooperating. Again, it wasn't the Solar Circle members that knocked on all the doors to get the legislators to change, but because we got that cooperation, we got that system shift. So just really the power of the cooperation. So today, as Lauren mentioned, we have a number of networks, the Soil and Climate Alliance working on Regen Ag. And notice here, you know, Susan always says, be able to say what you're doing in fewer than 9 words. The Soil and Climate Alliance is accelerating regenerative agriculture, and our goal, our big goal is 90% of U.S. agriculture is regenerative by 2030, at least starting on the path. The Soil Carbon Initiative, which came out of the Soil and Climate Alliance, it's a commitment and verification program for regenerative agriculture. We want to go after the global agriculture acres, you know, just 4.2 billion acres. By the way, the Soil and Climate Alliance itself came out of the Solar Circle, but I'll tell you that in a minute. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. Climate Safe Lending to work on climate and banking. We want 100% of banking practices to be net zero by 2040. Clean electronics to eliminate toxic chemicals in electronics industry. 15,000 facilities, 10 million workers protected by 2030. And it's well on its way. It's doing amazing work. And Solar Circle, we want 50% of all energy to be solar by 2040. It was originally 2050, but even folks like at Google and MIT say that we can do it by 2042. So let's go for 2040, huh? I'm going to do a case study really quickly on what the Soil and Climate Alliance is doing to accelerate regenerative agriculture. And the why is we want to regenerate soil, restore the climate, and rebuild farm prosperity. So let's see, here we go. Like I said, one of the things for the industry or supply chain KINS is that we have to really drill down. These folks, they really, they want to know what dials they can move and how they're going to measure their progress. So it took us about a year or so, but we really drilled down that we want, for the Solar and Climate Alliance, we want, the metrics are 90% of all agriculture acres in North America are on the pathway to regenerative, biologically based, multi-practice management systems that meet robust soil carbon outcomes and engage all the supply chain actors to ensure full support for farmers. Agriculture is very extractive in the farming community, and we want to reverse that. So at least we're attacking some pieces of capitalism and racism in the process. So by 2030, 30% of the farms would be beginning the journey, 30% would be progressing with major achievements already under their belt, and 30% would be the leaders that can help support and teach the rest of the system. So that's what we're focused on. So like every KINS does, we create a network of the leaders who really share this goal. They have been extraordinary, but here are the kinds of folks. It starts with the farmers, and then we have the food brands and the retailers and the investors. They're all in there, part of the mix. Here's just an example of some of our people. The list below is sort of is many of the companies and others that you might recognize. But I wanted to call out some of the other kinds of folks that we make sure are representing different constituencies. So Ray Archuleta is one of our soil scientists. I mean, he's an amazing influencer. Dr. Daphne Miller, you know, she's focused on regenerative agriculture because it makes on top of everything else, it makes the food more nutritious. And she works with people in the healthcare system, well, that are not in the healthcare system, and are another point of injustice and racism. She works with those folks, and she wants them to be able to have healthier food no matter where they get their food from. We bring in farmers of every size. Antoinette here is one of our smaller farmers. I think she has about five acres. All the way up to farmers who literally have 200,000 acres. So farmers of all sizes representing all different, I mean, even farmers represent a whole constituency network in and of themselves. And then folks like Zach Ducheneau, who, when he joined, was the head of the Intertribal Agriculture Council. He was now tasked by the Biden administration. He now plays a major role in USDA in terms of making sure that people from our tribal communities are included in all of the great work that the USDA is now doing. So we look at the marketplace strategies for, because again, we're a marketplace KINS. So we look at who's on the demand side, who's in the supply side, who's in the infrastructure side, what kind of investors do we have, and we want them, all those constituencies involved, to get the outcomes that we're looking for, with resilience, equity, and inclusiveness there at the center. And so the Soil and Climate Alliance generates ideas for initiatives, and the big ones that we're doing now, the Soil Carbon Initiative, it's gotten so big that we've created a network in and of itself out of that. We do regional implementation. We work with policy levers. We work on resourcing farmers, and we have special initiatives to bring justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion into the agriculture sector, which is possibly one of the worst of the industrial sectors. So really dynamic and interesting initiatives there. As I mentioned, the soil and climate, the regenerative agriculture work literally came out of the Solar Circle because, you know, Paul Hawken, many of you probably know him, one of the greatest influencers of all time. He said solving the climate crisis is simple, not easy, but simple. You got to stop putting greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, which is the work that the Solar Circle focuses on. But then even if we succeeded that tomorrow, we have all the legacy carbon into that can cause the disasters that we're all experiencing to get worse, even if we stopped all new fossils tomorrow. So we got to draw it down. And it was that realization back in 2010 that Solar Circle said, we're doing really well, we're going to succeed at our mission, but if we don't get somebody working on the other side of this, we're going to still be in a disaster. So that's what then created the work on the Soil and Climate Alliance, the work on regenerative agriculture. One of our big influencers is Dr. Ratan Lal, who is from India and Pakistan. He's worked all over the world. He's currently at Ohio State University. He won the 2020 World Food Prize, which is really a measure of his influence, because that usually goes to somebody in the corporate sector. And he just says, you know, a mere 2% increase in the carbon content of the world's agricultural soils could reduce carbon by 400 billion tons, or 100 parts per million. And if you are a climate geek like we are, that would mean today it's like 415 to 425, really alarming. It continues to rise. But that would take it from 415 down to 315, which is pre-industrial levels. Now, this is just climate math. It doesn't happen unless human beings in KINS circles actually go to work on this, but that's just an example. Now, you may ask, how does that happen? This is a little bit of a simplification, but you may remember from high school science that plants breathe in carbon dioxide. They use it to make sugars. They capture it in their roots, shoots, and fruits. And what's really interesting is what goes on in the soil, the roots. They are really good at networks. You know, KINS, all of us have a lot to learn about the networks. They trade sugars down there. The plants give sugars to the soil microorganisms, and in turn, the soil microorganisms support the plants. If you're planted right here and you need boron, and there's no boron, and you're in the reach of your roots, in a healthy soil, the microbial community can go in and get you that boron from a mile away if necessary. I mean, that's how amazing that system is. And it's part of the cycle of bringing carbon in. And the thing is, you need more and more health, more and more regeneration, because there is a carbon cycle. Plants use the carbon dioxide, they respire it. But the healthier and healthier the soil system, the healthier and healthier the plant system, is the more and more carbon they can put in the bank account, in the savings account in the soil. So that's the mission here. And in the meantime, you get all kind of other great things like greater biodiversity and water management and climate resiliency. So a very important process. Now you may say, okay, that's great, but does it happen? Oh my gosh, yes. Dr. Alan Williams, another amazing soil scientist who now also has a farm, You see that a lot with soil scientists. And there are actually 3 farmers on my team on the Soil and Climate Alliance, because that's what happens. But he did a study across the whole country about how long does it take for agricultural land to store cropland to store soil and increase their soil organic carbon. You can see that within 3 to 6 years, every part of the country, Iowa, which is rich in soil and rich in precipitation, all the way over to Kansas and Nebraska, which no precipitation, and yet they all can do it. So it's very, very exciting what can happen. And then there's another team of people who studied how long does it take in pasture land. Even better news in pasture land. Pasture land managed for regenerative practices can accumulate carbon and all the other benefits even more rapidly. And it's permanent. You may hear some arguments about how do you measure carbon. It is actually tricky to measure carbon in real time. But if you look at, if you actually use the really, really expensive carbon dating, we can't measure carbon in real time with carbon dating because it would be too time consuming and too expensive. But you can see here that the folks who have find that carbon stays stable in soil for a very long time, millennial. As I mentioned, from a climate perspective, you want that carbon sequestration, but you want all this other stuff. You want soil health because we've lost the topsoil around the world. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations says we have fewer than 20 to 30 seasons left before our soil capacity pretty much collapses. We got to get moving on this, let alone carbon for carbon drawdown. We also need it for climate resiliency. You'll see more about that in a minute. We need it for water quality. We need it for biodiversity. We need it for the rural economics for farmers and farm workers. And we need it for food security and food access. So the nutrition value is amazing. I mentioned the climate resiliency and the water management. What happens is that as soils get more healthy, they hold water. One of our soil scientists was once asked, so how much water should from a rainfall should your soil be holding? And his answer was all of it. Anytime you see runoff, anytime you see flooding in a field, you're seeing a field that can improve its soil health. Here's an example of, in a big drought in Costa Rica, 2 fields of cassava literally across the road from each other, and you can see the difference in a very severe drought between the regenerative one on the right and the conventional one on the left. I just came back from a month visiting our farmers around the country, and I was in North Dakota. One of our very influential farmers, Gabe Brown, who you may have heard if you have dialed into any of this, you should look him up. Gabe Brown does amazing work. I was there on a day in the middle of August. If North Dakota is lucky, they will get 4 inches of moisture this year. And moisture, I'm saying moisture, not rain, because that includes a little bit of ground cover from the little bit of snow they got. They didn't even get much snow this year. Anyway, long story short, they may get 6 inches. His neighbor fields look like the one on the left there. His field looked like lush, amazing pasture. He has a 19 species pasture mix. The sorghum was up to my waist. The soil temperature there was in the 70s, which you need because the soil microorganisms love the 70s. They can do okay on the early 80s. After that, they go into hibernation or unfortunately die. You've got nothing going on in your soil. His neighbor's field, by the way, we took a look at that, 124 degrees. Nothing is happening. There was a couple of plants that looked kind of like this. He had this lush pasture. As we walked through it, from my waist up, it felt like 88 degrees bearing down on you. From my waist down, it was a cool summer evening. By the time we got through the other side of that field, my jeans from my knees down and my boots were damp. And he's preserving that much water in his field in the middle of a drought in the high desert of North Dakota, where there's no irrigation. In addition to the carbon drawdown, it is really clear to me after this trip, and that was true. I mean, I was up, for example, in the high plains of Montana, where they may get 4 inches of moisture. They had 0 moisture from October 30th to June 1. They didn't even get a snow cover. the fields of the farmer that we work with, 20,000 acres, we're producing crops. Nobody around them was. No one else around them was. If we don't do this, never mind the drawdown part, we also have to do it for the climate resiliency part, or we could literally have large swaths of our country and around the world who won't be able to produce anything within the next 5 to 10 years. So this is really important. So that's kind of an example of what we're doing there. Here's some of the examples of the kind of frameworks that are developed. Like I said, remember we use the KINS frameworks, and then we have to develop specific frameworks. So here's a very important framework that's come out of this group, that when you use advanced soil health practices, you get the degraded soil into the healthy soil. And the thing is the degraded soil can't give us any of those benefits, and that's why we have to start regenerating the soil. This is really important. It looks pretty simple and logical, but there had been huge, before the Soil and Climate Alliance kind of developed this and got it influenced around the soil science community. There had been literally, I was in a soil science meeting. It turned out I was the token economist person there. And long story short, I was in the middle I had been seated in the middle of an oval table, and I didn't realize until the meeting progressed why. On my right were conventional soil scientists, on my left were regenerative soil scientists, and they were literally pounding the table at each other, which is unusual for scientists. About the conventional ones were saying, no, you can't get these benefits, and I know because I've been working on this for 30 years and I haven't seen it. And the other ones were saying, of course you can, and we know because we've been working on this for 30 years and we've seen it. They were actually both right. The conventional folks were working in degraded soil. The regenerative folks were working with healthy soil. And so I said, hey, stop, people, you're both right. And our job is to get degraded into regenerative. And that stopped the arguing and started the collaboration. So that was kind of cool. And it's a framework that's been emerged and developed by the network, and it's just been very important, which is the power of the network to reach in all of those circles, so that you get collaboration not only in your own network, but in the other circles. So these are some of the things that you do for advanced soil health management that I won't go into in detail. But I'm just gonna show you some of the great farmers we work with. Here's Rick Clark, 5th generation farmer, 7,000 acres. By the way, he's on the way to having all 7,000 acres in organic now. Again, even Indiana is having a drought. I was just there, and what he's doing is phenomenal. And on top of that, it is so profitable. Here's Rick's statistics. You can see all the things reduced to near zero, or 100% reduction, no synthetic nitrogen, no chemicals. That's really important for the greenhouse gas, because if you make fertilizer, you're sending nitrous oxides into the air. When you apply fertilizer, you're sending more nitrous oxides into the air. Nitrous oxides are even worse than carbon dioxide. But what this also does for farmers is it creates enormous economic benefits. And this is just from the input reduction. What happens is you spend much less time on your tractor applying fertilizer and herbicides and pesticides. So inevitably, talk about diversity. It starts with below ground diversity, you get above ground diversity, and then you end up with revenue diversity, because these farmers have more money in their pockets, they have more time on their hands, they create all kinds of new businesses. Cover crop businesses, Adam Chappell, his cover crop seeds are the things you need for beer. So him and a buddy created a microbrewery in town. We were just in Cotton Plant in June, and had a brew or two at his regenerative ag brewery. It was delicious. But same thing with Adam. He realized that he was hitting a wall because of a drought and a fire, and because the GMO seeds were that he used for his cotton had created such weed resistance. He was now literally having to apply more herbicides than he would earn from the cover crop. And he said, this is not economically sustainable, got to do something different. And discovered regenerative and has done amazing work. His savings for his 8,000 acres is a mere $2 million a year on input cost alone. Michael Thompson, another one of the great farmers in our network, has really worked on regenerative pasture. By the way, animal integration is really important. Without the animals like the buffalo and the prairies, can't do regenerative. We don't want factory farms. That makes the animals toxic and the corn toxic. But on the land, it's amazing. One of the things he was able to do in terms of saving money and regeneration is that he was able to reduce the amount of land he uses to raise his animals, which means there's more land now available for things like produce that families need. And Ed James, again, very different environments. Indiana is a very wonderful, optimal, usually, it's changing now because of climate change, weather area. Arkansas has too much water. They get a lot of rain, including hurricanes. So if you don't have the ability of your soil to drink up all that water, it creates flooding and loss of topsoil and all those pesticides and herbicides running into the Mississippi and creating the dead zone. So not if you drink in all your water. Florida, also very hot, very dry. In the citrus orchards, the soil looks like sand on a beach. They call it sugar sand. And they're having a terrible trouble down there with a disease called citrus greening that's actually killing a lot of the orchards. They're literally having to cut them down, which talk about investments for the farmers. Ed was having the same problem. He said, I can't afford to lose my orchard. He started looking at regenerative. His soil now has gone from sugar sand to what we would consider nice, dark, rich soil. And it reversed the citrus greening and reduced his costs. And you couldn't find a happier guy. So, here's, you can see on the chart here, before the disease hit his orchard, how many boxes of oranges he was getting per acre. With the citrus green, he went from 300 down to 5. He's now back to 300, and he didn't lose the tree. So many of the other orchards are losing the trees. The cost went way down, and his the nutrition value is back to where it was. So really great success story. So these are some of the things that we're learning, that when you regenerate your soil and learn how to manage your land, the transition to organic happens without yield loss. It's not just these specific farmers in our network, but one of our soil scientists, Dr. Jerry Hatfield, had 30 farms in his study, and they all increased their soil organic matter and carbon from 2% to 4%. They all increased their profitability per acre from $120 to $150 an acre. This year in the drought, people will be lucky to earn $2 an acre without insurance subsidies. And so this is huge. Farming brought them back to profitability and resilience. That was from Adam. And one of our other soil scientists says, take care of your livestock underground and everything will follow. So it's extremely important. The last thing I want to say is that it's also the power. I just want to again say the power of the network, just the magic and love and generosity. So in our Soil and Climate Initiative, which is a commitment and verification program, you need third-party verification in industrial settings, so we're doing that. But here's the power of the network, because most times verification systems are just very extractive, and here's a checklist and you must do it, and otherwise you pass or fail. Ours is a very KINS-like standard where we meet farms where they are and help them go across that spectrum from degraded soil to optimal. Just here's the power of the network. One of the companies in the network said, yes, I want to do this. I want to be one of the first. And so we started working with them. Among other things, they make chickpea pasta. And they said, we'd really like to bring in one of our farmers who, because we know they're doing some regenerative stuff and we want to make sure that this will make sense to them. We said, of course. Oh, yeah. So the farmers, they said, is this little farm, about 200 acres up in Montana. Do you think they could join the network? And we said, oh, of course. So we get on a call with them to do the KINS interviews to find out, are they really interested? Are they collaborative? Oh my gosh, they were amazing. So our other member was right in intuition, a little bit off on the numbers. They don't have a 200-acre farm. They have a 20,000-acre farm. They have gone from being 100% wheat to diverse rotations, 19 crop rotations. So they're, raising 3 kinds of chickpeas, 5 kinds of lentils, peas, all kinds of things, 19 different things. Because they're in the middle of nowhere, Montana, I did visit them on my trip this summer. They're 2 hours from a grocery store, big spaces out there. So when they started growing these other crops, they thought, how am I going to get them to market? There's a wheat granary, a wheat depot in their little town, but nothing else. So they said, we're going to have to create a processing plant for all of these other things. They now have 350 farmers that sell into their processing plant. They want to bring all of those farmers into regenerative agriculture, not because they don't want to lose another farm in the community. There's a lot of farms that are going out of business because of the drought. So now they brought in 350. So one company brings in one farmer who brings in 350 farmers and that one farmer, Jill and Tyler, they basically said, oh, wait, we sell into this other regional processor. They have 1,000 farmers. They bring the folks from the regional processors in. The regional processors say, we have to do this too because we don't want to lose any of our farmers. So from the network, one company in the network, out to, at this point, we're talking at least 5 million acres of people who will get involved in regenerative agriculture. That is the power of KINS, right then and there. Quick summary. So would love to get into the discussion and question part. Call me if you'd like to learn about any of the things we talked about today in this presentation, and sending love and quick recovery to Susan, because Susan, without you, none of this would have happened. Thank you, my sister.
Thank you, Alisa. And if you could stop screen share, then we can all participate. That was so awesome. Thank you so much. The depth and breadth of what you do is, I've got 2 cameras on here. There we go. The depth and breadth of what you do is pretty amazing. And there's Susan. Wonderful. Let's open up for some Q&A, and I give Susan a chance to say hello if you want to. Alisa just delivered an amazing presentation. I'm so glad we have it recorded. So what we're going to do next, we've got about a half an hour, and we would love to open it up for Q&A and find out how we can cross-pollinate our networks. Susan, you're muted, so if you wanted to say anything, not that you have to, but you can if you'd like.
Hi, everybody. I'm sorry. We've been in meetings and I just got back, but it's so exciting to hear the joy and news that you're sharing, and my life is worthwhile. So God bless every one of you.
Thank you for being the catalyzer for this amazing movement. So if you look at the bottom of your screen on Zoom, there is a reactions button. And if you click on the reactions button, there's an opportunity to click raise hand. So if you want to ask a question, make a comment about Alisa's presentation or about the network phenomenon, feel free to click the raise hand. So who would like to begin? Okay, so Stephen.
That was amazing, Alisa. I learned a lot. I'm an old KINS person myself and have known Susan since the 1980s. And I'm still learning, and I learned a lot from you today. And you're right in the conversation with Kinship Earth about how we get our outcomes into a format that we can measure our progress and our success. So I learned just from watching how you did it that we can apply those same principles to what we're doing in our current process right now as we grow our new Kinship Earth and figure our way through where we can add best to humanity's goal of making human beings net positive to Mother Earth. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephen. Stephen Gomes, of course, is one of the co-founders of Kinship Earth. And George Orbelian is the chair of our advisory team. So George, Take it away.
Yeah, thank you. Fabulous presentation, Alisa. I really appreciate the great work and the enthusiasm and carrying on Susan's vision. So I wanted to ask you, number one, we've got about 40 trillion sitting in pension funds. And that money could be mobilized into these regenerative futures. We gave in 2020 through a Yale study 5.9 trillion in subsidies to the oil companies. The pension funds, once you get in there and you're invested by them, those monies can flow into perpetuating the businesses that the market forces would actually disallow or start to make wilt. But because they don't have to go out into the open markets and so forth, they just continue getting funding. How can we help you, and how can we help the future of the planet by moving the money with responsibility and integrity into systems that will help regenerate the planet? That's number one. The second question is there a factor in all your work where you're actually creating codes and standards, sharing best practices, and somehow it's recorded on these regenerative natural systems? Because if we look at engineering of automobiles and aircraft and so forth, we've made tremendous progress because we rewrite the codes when there's a disaster. Is anyone doing that from your perspective, or should we be doing that as far as sharing best practices, creating standards and codes for how we treat the earth?
Great question. So on your first one, George, in terms of the investment side, a couple of thoughts, but I'll preamble it by noting that the whole regenerative agriculture system across the whole field is in early stage. So we'd be at this point tapping into the parts of the institutional investors who are willing to invest in early stage companies. There are a lot of them. It looks like Don, right on this call here, is part of that with his measurement and sensors, which is really important because being able to measure the soil health and the carbon in real time, really inexpensively, is part of the holy grail that hasn't yet happened. So it's an important thing. People are working on it, like Don. So there's a lot of early stage investments. In just our strategic partners alone, there's a couple of folks working like Don, slightly different angle, but like Don on the censoring question. There's a whole laboratory infrastructure that has to get built for all of these tests. There's the biggest limiting factor, in the system field map that we talked about, the biggest limiting factor at this point in time is people who can advise the farmers, and again, in a very KINS way, meet them where they are and go on the journey with them in a really supportive environment. I kid you not, there may only be 200 people in the country that can do that well. So there are a number of consulting firms that have started up. I visited with many of them over the last month. Every one of them is looking for people to hire, and so we have to solve that problem. But there's these amazing, I guess you could call them consulting companies. They do a lot more than that, but I'll just call them consulting. So there's a whole integrated network of folks that we need to invest in to be able to continue this, taking things to scale. So I would say that's where the investment opportunity is now. This is true for solar, 20 years ago. I'm expecting that in 3 to 5 years that will be some of these things will be mature, and there'll be other plays, just like there were other plays in solar to do investing out of their more of the equity, big equity, side. So I would say that on the investing. Just when you think regenerative agriculture, think early stage, which, by the way, KINS is really great on early stage, getting everything going early stage. So that's what I would say about that. in terms of standards and codes and frameworks, there's a lot of really great work being done because there are soil health principles that are actually accepted by the scientific community, even the conventional folks. You apply them differently in different realms. You know, if you kind of think of a 2x2 matrix, is your weather on average cold, and on average, are you wet or dry? If you kind of do a 2x2 matrix and get the 4 different zones there are really different ways that you would approach this. And so there's there's a lot of work to be done in creating the guidance. So from all the data, so we have the principles, the soil health principles, where more and more people are getting real experience, so we'll be able to develop guidance for it. And for example, our soil carbon initiative does in fact have standards to apply the principles. And again, they're developmental standards. They're not, you must check the boxes. They're, okay, here's your baseline, here's your soil health right now, here are the things that you could do. What are the right things for you to do given your context, your, which crops, where you are in the world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And how do we measure that you're making progress? It's that kind of a developmental standard. And that's all published on our website. It's public, it's third-party verified. So yeah, and then the last thing I'll say is that the carbon community, the carbon markets, are trying to figure out how to pay the agriculture system for the carbon markets. There's a lot of problems with it. They're taking the same ideas from the energy side, which work beautifully on solar energy, and applying them to soil, which they don't work so well for. One of the really big problems is around additionality, because there's a completely different way to think about it. But the carbon markets for agriculture have to be improved. And it has to be made sure that the money gets back to the farmers and not one more thing that gets extracted. So lots of different ways. And George, with your brilliant mind in the investment world, it would be lovely to compare notes on some of these things.
Thank you.
I also want to, one of the other experts you have in this circle, I mean, you have a number of them, but Walter, of course, is the biodynamic farmer. So in terms of North Star on all of this, if the whole world were biodynamic, we wouldn't even be having to have this conversation. So I want to acknowledge that. And I also want to shout out to Forrest, who's doing some amazing work in this realm too, of the hard part about getting these collaborations going. The farms and the companies and the investors getting those going at the community level. So amazing work going on amongst these folks.
Ooh, buddy.
Awesome. Lots of hands up. So Walter, did you want to respond since you were called out specifically before we go to Hank?
Well, I wanted to respond on a little different topic, and that I got to know Susan, I don't know, 22 years ago or so. And then I got to go to some of the meetings where Alisa was helping, and to watch Susan and Alisa working together. They were like sisters, and all this, everything you were describing just now, it's, I was always amazed your ability to pull all the ideas together and keep the meeting moving forward. So I just wanted to say that little observation.
Very impressive. Yes, agreed. All right, Hank. Hank is also on our advisory team. And let's see, you might need to unmute yourself, Hank, if you want to ask a question.
Alisa, I have listened to a lot of talks in the last 30 years, and I have to say you are the best good news I have heard in a long, long time, because you have both the vision and you have the tools to apply, and a lot of great tutors, the greatest of all on this call. I wanted to point to the other good news that's happened in the last couple of months, and that is that John Podesta was put in charge of $370 billion and is busy trying to figure out how to use it. And I think the concept, there's an interesting fusion in the potential of crop insurance and local redevelopment districts to bring another important member of this community of practice into the equation, and that is actually future generations. They are not represented very effectively in our business world. In fact, we all know about discount rates and the associated problems. So I would be honored to share with you some tools that Amory Lovins and I have been working for a long time to bring into utility. And I think the time is now right. And I think you have an amazing ability to present synthesis in a credible way, which has a huge power and potential for future generations, for whom you are obviously an active agent, and for which everybody on this call I know gives thanks.
Thank you.
I think that was a question.
That would be amazing, Hank, because the way the crop insurance is currently set up is one of the headwinds that we have to fix. One of those we have to do a little acupressure on it.
Beautiful. And on our website at kinshipearth.org, on the videos, Hank has a presentation about his intergenerational finance method that he has co-developed with Amory Lovins and others. So there's at least a taste of it for those of you who want to learn more. And we will follow up offline about engaging together and how we can collaborate on this. So Forrest, I see you have your hand up. Thank you so much for joining us today. Forrest is doing so much amazing work with soil health. So take it away.
It's a real pleasure, and thank you. And Alisa is always just awesome. Actually really want to just touch real quickly on a few different things. One is just love the language that you've come up with for the 90% on the journey for regenerative in North America. I think we might borrow that. In terms of George and standards, I would also highlight Russ Gaskin's work, who has worked very closely with Alisa Gravitz and his creative consulting and extraordinary number of templates in terms of how do you collaborate together that's available up on that site. You know, really in terms of my journey, Alisa was really and Susan, I just got to always continue to come back to acknowledge, because it was really Susan and her very gentle nudge on my back end to move me into this direction. And Alisa, that was the first trainer of the year that we went through about how to put together these collaborative networks. And so my participation in the Carbon Farming Innovation Network and really seeing what does amazing facilitation do when you're dealing with a whole large group, 60, 70, 80 of extremely busy people who are all coming from leadership in their own particular arena. And how does that come together? And what is that backbone services that's going on, working all night in the evenings to turn around and bring forward the consensus information? And so I'm anchoring that because it really is an incredible, important component of being able to bring these things all together. And I just, in the last piece in closing, also just want to acknowledge Hank and what he was saying in terms of the model that he's put together and really trying to figure out how to get kind of a working group or something together that's got the right folks in it to be able to move it forward. Lots of opportunities, and looking forward to sharing more in the future. And anyway, I don't have a specific question other than say I learned quite a lot, Lisa, again, even as much as I know in terms of the way that you have it. And thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Forrest. And we do a quick time check. We've got about 12, 13 minutes left. So we've got two more questions, two more hands up, Carmen and Don. So Carmen, I will toss it to you.
Hi, everybody. Very glad to be here. And thank you, Alisa, for this wonderful presentation and for your time today. My question has to do with consumers, with the general audience of society as consumers, Alisa, and particularly the self-publishing industry, you know, the authors today in paper, the use of paper. Can you address that? What are you seeing with regard to self-publishing industry? And you can extend it also to e-commerce with regard to paper.
So that is a very great question. Even since we did that work with trying to get people off of virgin paper, because I mean, what a crazy use of forest to cut down forests for making paper that's used one time. So the good news is that that was really successful KINS work. Even better news when it comes to paper, there's been a, since then, there's been a really great reduction of the use of paper for things like magazines. It's because most of, there's, I mean, huge use of moving online. So that's a really long conversation about what the various trade-offs are. And the story is still evolving, like on e-commerce. There was a point in time when it was actually more efficient and less impactful because it was reducing the average of 20 miles that people take to go shopping. On the other hand, at the scale that it's at right now, there might be a slightly different story. On the third hand, the ability to now move that to electric vehicles and other kinds of innovations. Sometimes transitions go like this. And so, even in solar, one of the early criticisms for solar was, well, you need fossil fuels to make the solar panels. That's still true, but we are not too far off from the point in time when renewable energy can make renewable energy systems. So, that's also the part of one of the frameworks that we use actually is we call it the 3 horizons. What's currently going on right now? What's the intermediate state going to look like? And where do we want to land? And to really understand what the transition points are so that we can move forward with real clarity on how we get from here to there and don't get bogged down by not being able to be 100% perfect today. And it's true in all of these things, right? We are in a transition state, and we want to make sure that we've got our eye on everything that we do today. Are we moving to that future state? And not only with respect to the particular network focus that we have, but also in relationship to things like the changes to capitalism or economics in general that may have to be required, and obviously all of the racist colonialist legacies that we have to repair. So we have to keep an eye on all of that so that we're not making system interventions that make any of those things worse. We want to at least want to make them better and point to an even better opportunity in the future. So great question.
Thank you.
All right, and Don, thank you so much for joining us. Do you have a question? Oh, I think you're muted.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate being here. You guys are all so inspiring. I wanted to follow up, and Alisa, great presentation. I would love to connect one-on-one and share with you more what we're doing. I wanted to touch on a couple points from earlier discussion. The first being around pension funds and sovereign wealth funds. And one of the things that we have been seeing is that both pension funds and sovereign wealth funds are starting to have more and more demands that their money be placed in companies that are successfully transitioning, and with asset owners and asset managers that are investing and selecting for people that are effectively becoming sustainable or pushing for regeneration. The problem is the asset managers and the asset owners don't know how to select for this. And the CEOs who are starting to get these demands from the board rooms don't know what to do either. There's too much complexity, and it's like people don't even know where to start. And so that's one of the things that we were sort of created to help sort of solve and work on. And with respect to regenerative, I think it's not just small farmers that are pushing for this. We had the other sort of aspect, work that was sort of the genesis of our company was my partner did a regenerative plan for the largest Japanese agriculture company. It was a 350-page report, cost a couple $1 million to do. It took a team of 30 people 9 months. And that report was a paper report, static results. It was delivered to a company with 16 presidents. And so how do you cut through that type of complexity towards any sort of actionable, framework for these people to make that transition? And I think what we have an opportunity to do is to take these models and make them dynamic, to cut through this complexity and use technology and AI to provide the optimal pathway to make these transitions as quickly and cost effectively as possible, and to really hold kind of the polluters and extractors accountable for the true cost of what they're doing, and quantify these negative externalities, but I think also quantify the positive externalities, like in regenerative farming, all the yield benefits, the production benefits, the health benefits, everything that goes with that. And so I think I'm encouraged. I think there's a lot of work that we can do to make the money and the effort that is being done to take companies and become sustainable, or take governments and transition as well. And I'm just really encouraged by what I'm seeing now and the people that are coming together to work on these problems. And I look forward to sort of participating in your group and helping however I can, and becoming part of this network.
Great. Oh, that would be great. Yeah. And by the way, in our soil carbon initiative, we have some specific ways that we, and this might be interesting to you too, George, the companies that participate and who earn the label, part of it is a financial commitment that they have to make directly to farms, based on the number of acres that it takes to produce their products. And hopefully that helps create an additional asset in the system where the farms are being rewarded for their land management, their regenerative management. So would love to compare notes.
So a couple minutes left. I see Hank has his hand up. I'm hoping it's a quick comment on that, and then we're going to bring it home and make some announcements of how we can participate together. So go ahead, Hank.
Thank you. The irony, of course, is that ESG presently, environmental sustainability, governance, social outcomes, are presently anathema in the marketplace. There's even a state that has made it illegal to consider, which is ironic because those are value creation pathways. So why is it that the money system and the value system have become so divergent? And I think that's because the business world has not been able to gain access to the future value of these processes. So by creating a market for future outcomes that includes these long-term consequences, pick the first dozen that come to mind, we can make it profitable, which it actually is. Managing the resources as though the future mattered creates more real value than the model we're using. So what you need is a transactional framework. And I think this group all sees that and agrees that needs to be done. So what I would like to offer, Alisa, is we have created a early stage software set called Outcomposer and Incomposer that allows you to retire dirty assets and replace them with clean assets. That's the center of your beautiful chart about left brain, right brain. Planning, retiring the old system and planning the new system. There's dozens and dozens of value creation opportunities in that equation, which are presently not accessible. I think that idea would be very compelling to John Podesta, and I think it would make a beautiful pitch for a president who's worried about the midterm elections.
Fabulous. Alisa, closing thoughts on that? Okay.
Yeah, there's so many angles. There's so many angles. That's probably a KINS network in and of itself, right? Because there's so many angles to this. I think actually having a way to express that intergenerationally in terms of investing would be absolutely game changing. I also, the reality is we have some opponents who this is just yet one other maneuver, and unfortunately, it's not one state; it's about 10 states up till now that are considering that kind of legislation. They're trying to protect fossil industries, kind of point blank is their job. So there's many different pressure points that we have to come at, but this is so exciting, Hank. I can hardly wait to learn more about the intergenerational financing mechanism. Very exciting work.
Well, thank you so much again, Alisa. It is astounding, the volume, the depth, the complexity, and just the heart that you're holding with all of this that you're doing, with Susan's spark of inspiration and encouragement. And so I want to also acknowledge every single one of you that is in this room today, or if you're watching the recording afterwards, you are drawn here for a reason. You are part of this extended community that we are all called from the heart to serve Mother Earth and to serve our planet and to take us from where we are to that next level of sustainability and regeneration. So we're really honored to connect with you. I want to announce that on September 23rd, the autumn equinox, we will be featuring Jyoti Ma and the founders of the Fountain Network. So that is a network of Indigenous leaders, and they will be providing an equinox blessing as well as an update on their initiatives. So together we are weaving our networks of heart-centered Earth advocates. We look forward to continuing the conversation. Feel free to connect with us in that Open Impact platform or online. And let's thank Alisa for her fabulous presentation. And let's do a final thank you and closing, especially to Susan and Walter and Stephen Gomes, co-founders of Kinship Earth, the next evolution of KINS Innovation Networks. Thank you all. Feel free to unmute yourselves, say goodbye.
Susan, Walter, bye-bye. Have a great weekend. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Lauren, for doing this. Appreciate it.
Great job.
Oh,
Great job, Lauren.
Fantastic, fantastic.
You guys are amazing.
Aloha.
Nobody wants to leave.
Hi, Susan. So good to see you.
Hi, everyone.
Lisa, it's really great to see you.
Thanks for here. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Kinship Earth Connections. We invite you to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. To learn more about Alisa Gravitz and her nonprofit Green America and the Center for Sustainability Solutions, visit www.greenamerica.org. To get on our invitation list for upcoming Kinship Earth Connections events, as well as to download our free ebooks, The Trojan Horse of Love by Susan Davis Mora and the KINS Network Playbook, please visit us at kinshipearth.org. Thank you.